When you are fundraising for your nonprofit or trying to get that fundraising strategy off the ground, what do you need to do? What practices do you need to put in place to keep your donors coming back and supporting your cause time and time again? That's what we'll talk about in this video. Welcome back. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I'm a nonprofit founder and executive director. I make these videos here on YouTube all about nonprofits and social impact and fundraising and changing the world and all that good stuff. I hope that you find this video helpful and useful to you in your own change-making journey. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Also, I have a website, foundertofulltime.com, where I have some trainings for people starting a nonprofit or developing a fundraising strategy. So I'm going to get into some tips on how to keep your donors coming back. But before I do that, I really want to talk about why this is so important in the first place. Arguably even more important than acquiring new donors. Here is why. According to an article by Simone Joyot, fundraising expert in the Nonprofit Quarterly, research estimate that it can cost up to 10 times more to acquire a new donor than to simply keep an existing one. So how do you keep donors around? It's through this process called donor stewardship. And if you're not familiar yet with this concept of donor stewardship, think of it as maintaining your relationships with donors over time, just like you would friends and family. You aren't going to keep your friends if you never see them and never talk to them and only go to them when you need money, right? Same with donors. You've got to maintain that relationship on an ongoing basis throughout the period of your nonprofit's work. And in the nonprofit world, if you do donor stewardship correctly, who knows, maybe your beloved donor will even come back with an even bigger donation next time. So what does it look like to maintain and retain a relationship with your donor over time? Now, I talk a lot more about individual donors and donor stewardship on my online courses over at foundertofulltime.com, but in summary, once your donor makes a contribution, you need to recognize them, thank them, and retain ongoing communication with them throughout the year. So now I'm going to get into these tips, these 6 concrete things that you can be doing to really make sure your donor stewardship is solid and that you're keeping these donors around. The first thing, and this is critical, is to say thank you, but do it in a timely and personalized way. Research shows that donors prefer to be acknowledged in 2 main types of ways. The first is by showcasing your impact. So because of your donation, we are able to do X or Y, really underscoring why it matters that they gave their money to your cause. And the second is doing it in a personalized way. So this can be a handwritten note, or at the very least, a personalized email where you're acknowledging them as humans versus through some kind of automated process. The second thing to consider is whether or not they prefer to be publicly or just privately recognized, and to honor whatever their answer is. Many donors, at least in my experience, actually prefer to be anonymous and not be acknowledged publicly. But for those who do prefer to be acknowledged publicly, making sure you're doing so in a respectful way, whether it be by putting a post on social media or including them in your next newsletter, etc. The second thing you can do to retain donors is share impacts. And I know that I mentioned this as part of the thank you process previously, and that is definitely an important time where you can be sharing your impacts. But you should also be sharing your impacts and outcomes as an organization year round. Outside of the thank you email or communication directly to the donor, you can be sharing your impacts in something like an annual report where you are showcasing the stories of those you've supported and helped, some of the data and statistics around your outcomes, etc. I also want to take this time to mention something important that is being discussed more openly in the nonprofit world as of the past couple of years, and that is being sure to create a sense of dignity for those your organization serves with your donors. Sometimes when donors give money to an organization, there can be an inclination to give them as donors more power than perhaps is appropriate in order to best serve your community and the people that you're trying to help. I get that it can be hard because as a nonprofit, you need those financial resources in order to do what you do. But the ultimate ideal state is one in which your donor feels like they are a partner to your organization and a partner to those you are serving in the community. Basically, making sure that the people that you're serving retain that inherent sense of worth and value, regardless of who might be contributing to their success through financial contributions. One really impactful thing that you might figure out how to do, if you can do so appropriately, is by giving your donors opportunities to connect as equals to the people that you are serving through your organization. Having human beings come together and develop a sense of connection and empathy is a surefire way to not only retain that sense of dignity for both sides, for the person who's being helped and for the person who might be contributing financially. And it also creates the desire to keep on supporting the cause. I mean, you're much more likely to want to support something once you have that personal connection. Of course, doing this should always and exclusively be with the consent of the people who your organization may be working with. A third strategy to retain donors is to provide a behind-the-scenes look at your organization's work. Here are a couple of examples. You might consider inviting some of your donors to your organization's board meetings so that they can see all the great work, the discussions you all have behind the scenes, and get a real glimpse of what it takes to run your organization. You might have a conversation with them where you're giving them a glimpse of your organization's future draft of a strategic plan. You know, being able to feel like you are included on the progress of an organization is something that could be very rewarding for someone who wants to invest in its success. Another example, if you have a physical space, could be as simple as giving them a tour of the space, explaining how things work. The fourth strategy to retain donors is by providing an opportunity to build community. And what I mean by this is that opportunity to get to know your cause a little bit more in depth, but also to connect as human beings to you and other supporters, other donors and volunteers. One way you might do this is by inviting those donors to come volunteer. They can contribute their time, they can contribute in a way that maybe they hadn't previously, and volunteering is a great way to see what the organization does firsthand. You might invite them to social events or networking events with your board leadership or other donors. You might invite them to have a coffee chat with you, something a little casual. You might consider giving your group of donors a special name that unites them, something like Givers for Good or Animal Lovers Society. The fifth tip I'm going to share is to try to understand what motivates donors to give in the first place. People give for any number of reasons, and understanding what those reasons are might help you tailor your communications with them to give them even more of what they're looking for by supporting your cause. It could be that the issue your nonprofit tackles has some connection to their personal values. It could be that they know someone personally affected by the issue that your organization is tackling. It could be that they have a personal connection to someone in your organization. I know that social friendships and connections are a huge motivator for a lot of people to give. Maybe they think that your impacts are awe-inspiring and you've done a great job of communicating your outcomes. Maybe they just felt really good at the way you welcomed them and treated them like a member of your community. It could be any number of these things or a combination of these things. But once you know what the answer is, and maybe even can see some patterns across all of the donors who respond to perhaps a survey you would do to find out what their motives are, you can do more of what's working and do less of what's not. And the sixth tip I'm going to share is to take the time to create a formal donor stewardship plan with your team. This is something that you can really create a real strategy around. And if you're able to do that, you're going to find that retaining your donors and acquiring new donors is a lot more easily done. Such a plan is going to lay out the step-by-step actions that you and your team will take when someone makes a donation. A couple of things you might write out in your plan might include: what actions do you take immediately after someone donates? Do those actions change based on the size of the donation? For example, do you do something different for someone who donates $5,000 versus $50? Which person on your team is responsible for reaching out to the donor when a donation is made? What are the types of communications you're going to plan to send your donors throughout the whole year? Will you have special events or recognition opportunities for your donors? And if so, when and what will they entail, and who will be responsible for planning them? Think of your donor stewardship plan as a guidebook for how to cultivate and retain your donors. I'd love to hear from you now. Are you starting your fundraising strategy right now, or working through some of these donor stewardship questions? What has worked for you already and what hasn't worked? I'd love to hear, so share in the comments below. As I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for some trainings on starting a nonprofit or developing a sustainable fundraising plan, I have those on my website, foundertofulltime.com. I also do a newsletter for changemakers and nonprofit leaders with news and trends and funding opportunities, so you can find the link to subscribe to that also in the description below this video. Final thing, I have a group on Facebook, Change the World or Bust, with lots of people in there on a social impact journey, having some good conversations, so I hope you can join us there. Once again, I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.